Reviewing either one of the 16-bit Castlevania is like comparing the great reports of two siblings. You don't want to put down either one of them, but the comparisons are inevitable. All in all, Super Castlevania 4 has welcomed more than its fair share of fellatio over the years, while Bloodlines was relegated to those who play as Luigi even when they are by themselves. Today I'll bring out the side of me that picks Bulbasaur as a starter by trying to shed light on how solid Bloodlines truly is. From start to finish, this game is a lesson on overcoming spacing and range. Regardless of your choice between Jim Morrison and Eric of Melnibone, your defense and offense run along the same lines. Defensively, the protagonists show their Belmont lineage by displaying athleticism most closely resembling the likes of Paralympians. If you want to maintain your health, try with a simple dodge or a couple of steps back. Anything more elaborate is hopeful thinking. The moves just aren't meant to flow in quick succession like that. The offensive side of things is similarly straightforward. Throughout the stages, the player will find, containing candles and chandeliers, these coats of arms. Collecting them grants cumulative reach and damage, allowing enemies to be dispatched faster and from farther removed the more of them are possessed. Meanwhile, the sub-weapons are meant to cover the ground the basic weapons don't. As comfortable as a directional attack is, it devalues a whole axis of the action. Here there is a hint of strategy in figuring out which one is best for a certain section, being able to keep it up to that point, and then using it properly. It might seem silly to explain how a Castlevania game works, but actually, Super Castlevania broke most of the conventions I just described. It empowers the player a lot more by providing some air control and a whip that covers almost half the screen at its most powerful. I wouldn't say it's better though, it's different, and pretty much a case of tough love for Genesis users. Being more restrictive towards the player makes sense when you realize the level design is meant to iterate on itself constantly. This principle is better observed in the first two stages. Just by how you have to deal with the boss fights, the message is obvious. Positioning is a priority. Later on, you're asked to think a lot quicker on your feet. At this point, however, it's just knowing where to stand and when to attack. Right at the start of stage 3, you'll get introduced to the Harpies, which don't have to be defeated as much as kept at bay. They are erratic and constantly are where your whip or spear can't. You better get used to dealing with them because things only go up from here. Before reaching Dracula, things can get quite tricky, especially near the end when the wacky ometer goes bananas. The difficulty curve progresses stage after stage, and yet the elegant thing is that it never stops being about hitting without getting hit, swimming without getting wet. It ends up being a double-edged course, both a sword and a sword, so to speak. Compared to Super Castlevania, the design is much more waterproof. For instance, you rarely have an advantageous position over the enemies right off the bat. At best, you are in equal standing, not so much over in the SNES entry. One thing I do believe it has over Bloodlines is a lot more flair. You could tell the developers wanted to flex the new hardware as much as possible, but even beyond technical show-off, you get things like platforming over swinging chandeliers or going down a water stream. I'm not saying Bloodlines is worse for not having such set pieces, but I do believe it would be better if it did. Part of it is plain selfishness on my behalf. This was the last Castlevania before Symphony of the Night, so I wish we could have gotten some more balls to the walls 11 concepts before the franchise forgot them entirely. That definitely would have helped the legacy of the title. Let's face it, most attention directed to classic Vanias goes straight to the NES trilogy and or Castlevania 4. Despite coming out 3 years later, to me, Bloodlines is a more direct continuation of Castlevania 3's design philosophy. A classic on its own right that is constantly overshadowed. Is it fair? It is what it is. Let's leave it at that. Now, if you'll excuse me,